and welcome to Classical Schmassical, the anti-classical classical music podcast. Tune in every Saturday as we discuss, deconstruct, and dissect what it means to be a musician in the modern world. I'm your host, Alexa Letourneau. I use any pronouns, and our guest this week is Christina Salerno.
Hello, thank you so much for having me, Alexa.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. I'm wondering, as we get started, if you could just introduce yourself, kind of what you do, and a little bit about your background.
Sure. So my name is Christina Salerno. I am currently Executive Director of Illinois Philharmonic Orchestra. I've been here since 2017, handle the administrative side of the orchestra. Prior to being here, I was Executive Director of Salt Creek Ballet, located in the western suburbs of Chicago. Prior to that, I was a professional ballet dancer for about 15 years. Yeah, and it's been a great careers plural in the arts.
Yeah, that's amazing. So, with a background as a ballerina, it's super fascinating to me. I don't know many professional dancers or former professional dancers or anyone in that field. I'm curious if there's any skills that you learned in your dance career that have been particularly helpful to your role as a director of the arts.
Yeah, lots of skills. So first and foremost, I think dancers in general are pretty comfortable being in front of people and like with presentation, although we're usually trained to move and not speak. So speaking is something I've had to learn a little bit.
Sure.
But like that performance quality, I think I'm actually an introvert, but most people don't know that because I think I have kind of managed to occupy kind of an extroverted space and just being in front of people a lot. Dancers also tend to, do everything to a very high level and kind of are overachievers, as most people I think that train for anything that, takes that infamous 1,000 hours of mastery, right? Like anyone who's like that, I think has an attention to detail and is able to kind of apply that to other fields. So I feel like that's something that dance definitely gave me. Also, like, anytime you're in a performance oriented career or have that experience, like, that life just doesn't happen the way you expect it to or that you plan for it.
Yeah.
So being able to kind of just go with the flow when things don't work to plan and keeping a smile on your face, I think is something that ballet dancers also
for
really
sure
excel at.
Yeah. And then how did you decide to make this professional switch from a practitioner of the arts to an administrator of the arts?
Yeah, so a dance career is traditionally pretty short. So a lot of dancers are thinking about what they might do kind of after their performance career. Although there are a lot of people now continuing on much longer, which I'm really excited to see.
Yeah.
But for me, I just kind of started noticing because I worked in a lot of different organizations and worked under different administrations and then different artistic leadership. And I just kind of started to see what to me seemed like was working and when it wasn't working. And I just decided that I would want to be part of that kind of what is working environment for future generations. And so arts administration just became kind of a natural progression for what I was doing. When I was in Boston Ballet, I was already working in their Dancers Resource Fund, kind of helping raise money for dancers for their career transition, but was kind of the first opportunity that I had towards like the development side, fundraising, like planning an event, all that kind of production elements, talking to donors, getting people in the door, logistics. So I kind of liked it and just kind of went from there.
Yeah, I think that's really wonderful. And like as someone who was, working in that field, I think you really get an idea of what works and what doesn't. That's definitely something that I ponder as I'm like moving through academia and the education system and this conservatory lifestyle is I've definitely got some ideas for when I will hopefully become an educator of my own. So I think that really speaks to something that's true. With you really learn the system by being inside of it.
For sure. And congratulations being on that journey.
Thank
I think
you.
one of the things I've learned is that like the journey hopefully never stops. Like the
Yeah,
schooling officially might, but like the learning doesn't.
for
And I
sure.
read a great book by Thomas Friedman, who's a New York Times columnist, a number of years ago, pre-pandemic, and it was called The Age of Acceleration.
Mm,
And in there, he kind of postulates that like gone are the days where we go to school and train for a job, whatever that job may be, that like
yeah,
now we're all creating our own working, living environments. And so it's kind of exciting because there's a lot more flexibility. It's also a little scary because there's not as
yeah.
many clear-cut answers, but good for you for going for it.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I definitely feel that. I'm already like, oh, I'll just pick up this little side gig here and have this job here. I know that sounds fun, and it's a very multifaceted experience, and I'm really having a great time with it. Um, so yeah, from that dance world, how did you make your way over to the classical music scene?
Yeah, so I decided to get a master's degree in performing arts administration.
Hmm.
And so I started looking around at different programs, and there was a fantastic one just starting at that time at the Chicago College of Performing Arts at Roosevelt University. It was a brand new program, and it was run, and I believe still is, by a man named Henry Fogel. At the time was dean of the school, but Henry had been president of the Chicago Symphony for 18 years. And
Yeah.
so like, his background was really steeped in classical music. And so I did the master's program, absolutely loved it, had great faculty instruction and some great conversation, and just started getting immersed a little bit more in the classical music scene. I also realized during that point, there were a lot of things that I really missed about being a ballet dancer. There were a lot of things
Hmm.
I did not miss, but there were some things I missed. And one of the things I missed was I realized that I was really lucky to be in companies that always had live symphonic music, pretty much
Mm,
for all of our performances. And I just loved classical music, and I missed having it be a part of my life on a regular basis.
yeah.
So when a job opened up here at IPO, I just kind of thought, hey, maybe I could try my hand at running an orchestra and learn some new skill sets at the same time, but be surrounded by music I love.
Yeah, for sure. So did you kind of just find the Illinois Philharmonic just at the right time, or was there anything that specifically drew you to that ensemble?
Well, I don't know if Henry actually told me specifically about it, but at that
Hmm.
point, I was definitely like just more keyed in with musical ensembles and starting to investigate more of like what was in the area and what might be the possibilities. So I'm not sure which came first, but definitely my
Sure.
horizons were widened, and I was really excited to hear about it.
Yeah, amazing. So I'm really curious, as someone who hasn't really engaged yet with any arts administration, what does your day-to-day sort of look like? What does this job entail?
Yes. Well, I come in every day with an idea of what I will do. And I like, yeah, I'm a big list person. And so like I have a list written for like what kind of tasks need to get done.
Yeah.
But inevitably, like a whole bunch of different stuff ends up getting thrown at me.
Hmm.
So a good portion of my job is like day-to-day management and operations type things. So I oversee our personnel manager and our librarian, although the music director oversees both of them as well in some facets. And then, our box office marketing and development. And so there's a lot of conversations that happen about like, where are we with the fundraising and what communications need to go out, what needs to be proofread, things like that. Issues with musicians coming through as far as, who's being hired for the next concert and what instruments we need. And if there's questions about who we should be hiring, a lot of times it'll
Mm.
come through me, although I might not have the final say. I might have to bring that to our music director. I also do a lot of the budgeting. So the budget kind of process starts with me. Music director will come up with programming for the following season, and then I'll work on like costing it all out and saying, this is awesome, but we can't possibly afford this. And so like,
Sure.
where can we make adjustments? Where are the smart places to make adjustments? Where should we be spending more? I do a lot of fundraising, so a lot of calling and meeting with potential donors or current donors, of talking to them about organization and consensus building, getting people on board for bigger projects. We actually just finished a strategic planning process, a plan last year. And so we're not quite ready to be starting a new strategic plan, but like that's one of my roles as well, is to be looking at like 3-5 years down the road, how will we get there? What steps do we need to be doing to get us to those places? So it's a lot of email, a lot of looking at contracts, a lot of negotiations, a lot of communications, a lot of proofing, and just kind of asking a lot of questions to make sure that we're on target to get stuff done.
Yeah, for sure. I also like what does the funding look like for an orchestra? Like where does it come? Is it all donors or mostly donors? And what kind of say do they have on like things like programming, or where does the money come from? As someone totally clueless, really.
Yeah. So we only make about 25% of our income from ticket sales.
Mhm.
So we have to raise a lot of money to be able to put on
Yeah.
concerts. I think there's definitely a movement towards making all arts experiences much more equitable and much more inclusive, and a lot of that comes down to socioeconomic status and like who
Mhm.
can pay and who can't pay. And one of the things that we always think about though is it would be great to let everybody not pay,
Right.
but we still have to pay the artists, like they're the one,
Yeah.
and that's our biggest cost, is actually paying artists for what they do. I will say, I wish I could pay artists more as well,
Mhm.
because on, a minute by minute, cost analysis probably, and how many years and hours of work it takes to get to that one concert that, you
Mhm.
hear for an hour and a half or 2 hours, you're not really just paying for that 2 hour bit, you're paying for everything
Yeah.
that came before. And we don't even come close. No organization comes close to compensating for all that. Um, but so the rest of the money has to be raised predominantly from individuals.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of kind of one-on-one fundraising that goes on. We do have a good number of corporate sponsors. We're always looking for more corporate sponsors. Unfortunately, I think over the past 20 years, a lot of corporate money has been gone to a lot of the larger organizations,
Mhm.
and organizations that are really in the metropolis. And because, it used to be that you could just talk to a corporation, and if you knew kind of someone a little bit high up in the organization, or they really liked you, then they'd be able to funnel some of their corporate dollars your way. But
Mhm.
now so many things are conglomerate or international companies or national companies. There's whole teams of people that are making those decisions, and it's just harder to get in front of those people sometimes.
Sure.
So I think that's one of the things that I'd like to see change and kind of shift back. And then we do have a number of foundations. We definitely get some funding from the Illinois Arts Council Agency.
Mhm.
We've applied again for federal money from the National Endowment for the Arts. We'll see whether or not we get that.
Sure.
And then there's a bunch of private foundations that support IPO. So it's a mix all the time.
Yeah. Wonderful. So I know that you were just named the 2022 Executive Director of the Year by the Illinois Council of Orchestras. So huge, huge congratulations on that.
Oh,
Um,
thank you so much.
yeah, it's an amazing achievement and clearly so well deserved. So I'm curious with that, what do you see as some of your greatest triumphs while working with the IPO, and what are some goals that you still have?
Sure. So triumphs are, I think, the fact that the organization has, up until COVID, we had 3 years of increased audience numbers,
Yeah.
which I think is fantastic. And we've obviously been able to raise a lot more money, which, although speaks a lot to the work that I've done, I think even more speaks to the quality of product that we put on stage.
Hmm.
Because if that quality is not there, then you really can't raise money.
Sure.
So, I'm really proud of expanding our educational efforts, especially in the light of COVID. A lot of our education efforts prior to COVID were centered around kind of 4 youth concerts where we bussed children into one venue and did some great concerts really wonderful experience, but it was harder and harder for school districts to do even during,
Hmm.
before the pandemic. So now we've just kind of had to re-envision how we do that. And we're doing a lot more, going into individual schools, servicing a lot more students right in their school district, talking to school districts about what makes sense for you and trying to fit those needs instead of just putting something out there. So I'm really proud of
Yeah.
our partnerships and our ability to kind of meet the need as opposed to just saying, this is what we do and do you want it?
Hmm.
Um, future, I really want to see us growing our programming to be more inclusive and more equitable. That takes not only programming on our end, but it also takes, audiences
Sure.
embracing that. And
Yeah.
I really have been really impressed with our audiences, and they've seemed like they've been excited kind of to go on this journey with us. And I'd like to see that grow. And
Yeah.
over time, I'd like to see the orchestra become even more visible in our region. We have some exciting commissions coming up, and I'd love to, people to know more about that.
Yeah, wonderful. So can you talk a little bit more about the education initiatives? And I know that you have some current expansion process. Is that more geared towards going out into schools, or what does that look like? As education is something very near and dear to my heart, so I'm always
Yeah,
interested.
Yeah, so we just hired a fantastic new education and community engagement director, probably about 6 or 7 months ago now, Lindsay Fredrickson. And Lindsay actually has her own program called Camp in the western suburbs, or actually, no, the western Chicago area. She is in the city,
Mhm.
not in the suburbs,
Mhm.
where she gives instruments and music lessons to a lot of students who wouldn't otherwise have access.
Yeah.
And so she's, really near and dear with education as well. So she's been, making a whole bunch of programs like we have, which we've always done a little bit, but now we're just doing more of them and trying to be more proactive in going to schools with some string quartets, some woodwind quintets. There's a
Mhm.
brass trio that she's getting ready to bring to a new library program to like read stories to pre-K through fourth graders probably, and then I have a
Mhm.
music element with it, like artists going directly into the schools. So some of our musicians going into the schools and talking with classrooms. Something we've always done is called Meet the Maestro, where our conductor goes in and usually to high schools and uh, conducts, a session of the school
Sure.
there. And then we try to offer free tickets so that students and their parents can come to see concerts. So, really, we're not reinventing the wheel so much as we're trying to re-engage the community and really be a resource for all of the schools in the south and southwest suburbs if they want a high quality musical experience that we're happy to come to them. We also do coachings. We're doing
Yeah.
some of those with some local high schools. I think out in one of the more southern suburbs, we're doing introducing the students that are just starting a new spring program to what their instruments might be, things like
Fun.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So really multi-tiered, multi-leveled. As part of the new institute, we also have a fantastic harpist, Lisa Tannenbaum, who's going to be coming and doing some master classes, not just with harp, but
Mhm.
to give the harp as a beginning, experience. And then, there's so many things that you can still talk to the kids about with rhythm and
Yeah.
tone and tempi and things. And so using that as a kind of plank to jump to new heights. And it, both for students that are already engaged in classical music and ones that aren't.
Mhm.
So often I hear adults now that come on our board or come to our concerts, and I talk to them about like, why are you here? You're not a musician. And they said, oh no, but when I was in, third, fourth, sixth grade, I had this experience that somebody came to my school and played some instrument, and it really like opened my realm. And so I started listening, or I started, I wanted
That's
to be more involved.
amazing.
Yeah.
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 Oh, I just got chills. That's so
Oh, good.
cool.
Good.
Yeah. So you talked a lot about community engagement, and I'm curious as to how you perceive the difference, and maybe this is a little bit of a loaded question, but how you perceive the difference between community engagement and community outreach, and what that looks like.
Yeah, so it's kind of easy to change the word.
Right.
Outreach being, like we're doing something and we're going to give it to you.
Hmm.
And engagement being like, what do you need and how can we meet that need? Um, it is much harder to do it, I think, in practice authentically.
Yeah.
And I think it, it doesn't take more time, but it takes different time,
Mm.
because you're no longer planning kind of in your silo in your office of what you think someone else would like, or doing, the marketing studies to say, oh, there's an audience for this, but instead you're actually like going into the community and saying, what do you want to see? Like, what
Yeah.
would be helpful? And sometimes people don't know, and
Hmm.
sometimes you have to give them some ideas. But once they start getting those ideas or getting those touch points, then they start coming up with better concepts,
Yeah.
that not better but resonate more, and you can find new ways to partner. I think it's really about partnership, and really, the definition of partnership is that both parties, get something out of the agreement. And so that's the hope, is that, both parties are really benefiting. Um, Sometimes it looks a little different. It's
Yeah.
challenging sometimes because, we have a union, there's certain rules of how things need to happen. Um, and there's ways that things have historically been done. And so it's really easy to say, oh no, we can't do that,
Hmm.
because of X, Y, and Z rule that's already in place or whatever. And I'm really lucky to have a lot of good conversation with our musicians to say, like, this isn't working. Let's figure out a way that
Yeah.
we can, this is what the school is saying they need. How can we do this? Like,
Hmm.
how can we change this around? So I think that's the engagement part. And
Yeah.
it's not just engaging the partner, but it's engaging everybody in your organization to think a little bit differently.
Yeah, for sure. I think historical precedent is something that can be such a double-edged sword, and kind of working within that, especially in a tradition that is so just is so established as classical music. We've been like doing what we're doing since, I don't know, like Hildegard von Bingen, maybe arguably, who know, who's to say? But yeah, I think that's a really wonderful way of approaching that, and it sounds like you're really making a difference in your community.
I hope so. I like to think so.
Yeah.
I think when you have a young person come to a concert, you feel like that's a win.
Hmm.
And you're not going to have everybody, you're not going to know all the
Right.
wins now, though. This is the thing, is that
Yeah.
you're going to find out 10 years from now that you sparked an interest in somebody and it led them to
Yeah.
whatever. So luckily we've been around long enough that we do hear some of those stories too, which is great.
Yeah. Oh, that must be so wonderful. I love that so much. Um, so I know it's not coming up for a bit, but as a composer, I'm really interested in your classical evolve competition and how the process for selecting composers to work with in residency. So I'm curious if you can touch on that.
Yeah, sure. So we have a call for scores. And usually, previously, our composer, the Classical Evolve competition had been in May. So we've
Hmm.
moved it now to the fall. So pretty soon we'll be coming out with a call for scores.
Okay.
The scores that we get in, then we have our music director and then a judge kind of reviews them. And from that, they pick three composers to be finalists. And then those finalists are given a specific instrumentation for about 25 players.
Hmm.
And so they compose a brand new piece for about 25 people.
Yeah.
And then on the classical evolve day, they actually, the composers come here in residence, and then the musicians get to see the music. They've usually seen it like a few days before, but not a long time.
Hmm.
And then they play it. And then we have an audience. And then we do a voting. So we have some judges, and then the audience gets a vote, the musicians get to vote, and then the judges get to vote. And then from there, we pick the composer that'll be our composer in residence for the next season.
Hmm.
And that person composes 3 new short works for our
Yeah.
season. Um, Interestingly, when we first did the composer in residence, it was, for young composers. And so I think we had an age limit of like 35 or something.
Hmm.
And I don't think we had any females submit. And so then, through talking to a bunch of people, we heard a lot of times, unlike yourself, a lot of times females start into composing later on in life. And
Hmm.
by doing an age constraint, we were unwittingly discriminating against females.
Interesting.
Yeah, so we actually changed the second year, we changed the qualifications, and now you just have to be an emerging composer.
Hmm.
So you can't have had more, I forget exactly the things, but you can't have had many works performed by a full adult symphony orchestra.
Sure.
Um, and so we actually had a number of females apply, and that second year we actually had a female win the entire
Hmm.
competition. And so we actually have Martha Horst's final work, which would have been in our 1920 season, will
Hmm.
actually be performed this May, and we're so excited about that.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah,
Yeah.
that I never really thought about, that kind of unintentional barrier, because I'm mostly focused on young composer programs right now, kind of as I'm sort of transitioning out of graduate school into probably my next set of graduate school, degrees. But but it is where my focus lies, and it's really interesting that having that kind of age versus experience, how that played out.
Yeah, yeah. And who knows? I mean, hopefully these things will shift, right?
Right,
As more and
absolutely.
more people see composing as a real career option or something that they
Hmm.
really want to endeavor at an earlier point, I'd love to
For
see that
sure.
shift.
Yeah. And I know for me, like I started playing flute quite early and really, really quickly, maybe 2, 3 weeks after I started playing flute, I was composing things for it because they were just the same thing for me. It was making
Right.
music. And I like finding out that composition was like A, not something that everybody just did, and B, that it was something that you could pursue as a career was like a very involved process for me. So even though I did start composing quite young, I can see how that could be something that is really a barrier.
Yeah, yeah. That's really interesting. Some people are just creative by nature right away.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's really interesting. Just the way that everybody's like, I don't know, artistic expression manifests.
sure.
And it's so different.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So I want to be really respectful of your time, but is there anything else that's upcoming that you would like to promote or talk about or anything before we wrap up?
Well, we definitely have our last 2 concerts of the season.
Yeah.
April 30th is an all Brahms concert.
Okay.
And then May 14th, we have a concert that includes Prokofiev's Piano Concerto No. 3 and Martha Horst Reverberations, and then Scheherazade by
Hmm.
Rimsky-Korsakov.
Oh, I love Scheherazade.
All yeah, all like great music that a lot of people would recognize.
Hmm.
So I think both are really approachable concerts. And we perform in Palos Heights, so southwest suburbs, and super easy to get to. And I think when people come, they're always really impressed and sometimes surprised if they're new to kind of hear the orchestra and just know that you can, experience live music for a pretty affordable price,
Hmm.
in your local community. And I guess I should mention, if anyone doesn't feel like they can afford that, we have a program with 34 libraries called Check Out IPO, where people can actually go and check out tickets to a concert if they're still able at their local library. And you can check on our website for the
So
libraries that are
cool.
involved. Yeah, so just one way that
Yeah.
we're trying to make it more accessible to as many people as
That's
possible.
amazing. Can you tell me more about that program? Because now I'm super interested in that.
Yeah, yeah. So there's a list of libraries on our website, so ipomusic.org, and there's
Mhm.
I think it's on the support section. There's to check out IPO, and there's a list of all the different libraries, and so you just go to your local library and, ask them if they still have tickets available. Some libraries, they go really quickly. Some libraries, they
Mhm.
don't. They're supposed to be rotating who gets them. So there should be, adequate ability. And we usually have, I don't know, about 75 to 100 tickets coming from libraries every
That's
concert.
amazing.
So yeah, it's really
Oh,
good.
yeah. What an amazing program. Libraries are
Yeah.
just such phenomenal cultural centers, and getting that partnership is super inspiring.
Right. No, completely.
Yeah, that's so amazing. Well, thank you very, very much for being here. And thank you at home for listening. If you enjoyed the show, there's plenty more where that came from, so do make sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode. And if you'd like to continue this conversation, please feel free to join the Discord linked in the description, or visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/classical schmassical. It's schmassical, Schmassical. I almost forgot how to spell my own show there. And remember, as always, stay classy and questionably classical.